In this lesson, what we're going to do is talk about the structure of the Labour Party. Now, if you're following these videos on for A-level politics, then you should know that in the last lesson we examined the structure of the Conservative Party. We looked at all the quote-unquote institutions within the party, the different councils, the different bodies, and the different aspects of the party that build up its structure. We talked about how the leaders of these parties are appointed, specifically of the Conservative Party, and then we also looked at how the Conservative Party goes about creating and establishing policy. Well, we're going to do all of those same things, examine all of those same issues and institutions, but for the Labour Party instead. Now, the structure of the Labour Party is slightly different to that of the Conservative Party. Some might even say slightly more complicated, because at a more local level, there are two main institutions that we can talk about, two main bodies that we can talk about for the Labour Party. We have the Constituency Labour Party, and we have the Regional Labour Parties. So the regional Labour parties act in a very similar way to that of the regional Conservative parties. For example, the Scottish Conservatives and the Welsh Conservatives. Very similar in that regard that we also have Scottish Labour and we also have Welsh Labour as well. At a national level, there are two main institutions that we can focus on. We have the NEC, which is the National Executive Committee, and we also have the Parliamentary Labour Party. Now, all of these things and all of these regional institutions are all involved in the process of both policy establishment and also through the way in which we appoint members of the Labour Party, specifically the leaders of the Labour Party. So let's just examine each of them very, very quickly briefly, and then talk about what their roles are in the sort of interconnected process of both electing a leader to the Labour Party as well as the process of establishing policy. So, and we could also mention as well that I will talk about the fact that we have affiliations with trade unions and other organisations as well that also play quite a key role in this process of appointing a leader as of 2018 at least, and then also the process of establishing policy. So the local structure of the Labour Party, as I've just said, consists of the Constituency Labour Party and also the regional institutions as well. So the Constituency Labour Party, the CLP, exists in each of the constituencies and exists as a membership opportunity for the Labour Party at a local level. Okay, so the constituency line for the CLP they're all exactly the same as the constituency lines for the actual constituencies within the United Kingdom. At a regional level, we have the Welsh Labour Party, and we also have Scottish Labour as well. Now, these, interestingly, are regional parties that over the last few years we have seen a decline in both membership and also success when it comes to their electoral, the electoral seats that they have won. For example, the House of Commons, there is only one of the Scottish seats that is filled by Scottish Labour. For the most part, when we talk about politics in Scotland, there is quite a heavy domination of both the Scottish Conservatives and then also mainly the Scottish National Party, the SNP. And so therefore, when we look at the Scottish Labour Party within the Scottish Parliament, they only hold 22 seats of, I believe, 126 or somewhere around there. So we see that they are significantly less in terms of their ability to influence policy. But when it comes to their roles within the Labour Party itself, they still hold somewhat of a major role in being able to be involved in a number of different actions, specifically things relating to the creation of policy, because we'll see later on that the creation of policy within the Labour Party is a lot more transparent and a lot more democratic than that of the Conservative Party. So let's look at the national structure now. So at a national level, probably the most important of the institutions is the National Executive Committee, the NEC, of the Labour Party. Now, the NEC is simply just the governing body of the Labour Party. There is a number of different reforms and things that take place over the years when it comes to the National Executive Committee. And then on top of the National Executive Committee, we also have the national level Parliamentary Labour Party, the PLP. Now, the PLP, as the name suggests, consists of Labour MPs, so members of Parliament for the Labour Party. And we will get to what the PLP does when it comes to the appointment of a leader a little bit later on, just after we've talked about the trade union affiliations, because the PLP is actually, they play a very significant role, at least in the first stage of the election process of a new leader for the Labour Party. Now, as I've already mentioned, we have affiliations with trade unions as well within the Labour Party. So, on top of the institutions that we've just talked about, the Constituency Labour Party, the Parliamentary Labour Party and the NEC, for example, and also the regional institutions, Labour is also affiliated with 12 trade unions. Okay, this has reduced significantly from, it's reduced from 14 since 2018, but we have seen that there is still 12 trade unions that are affiliated to the Labour Party. These are coordinated and organised by the Trade Union and Labour Party Liaison Organisation. This sort of acts as an umbrella institution that organises and coordinates with these 12 affiliated trade unions to work with the Labour Party and to work with these trade unions as a way to better harmonise the relationship between the two. Now, you can go onto the Labour website and go to the Labour Party website and look at the trade unions that are affiliated with the Labour Party. There are two here that we could mention. The GMB, which is the Trade Union for General Workers in Public and Private Sectors. And we also have Unison, which is the Public Service Union for all those providing services to the public, whether that be through public employment, private employment, or volunteership. Now, trade unions obviously have a very close relationship with the Labour Party, because trade unions effectively are organisations that represent workers in certain industries. Okay, they unionise together workers in certain industries to give workers a collective voice when it comes to making decisions that will affect them effectively. And so therefore, because obviously Labour is historically seen as the party for the worker and the working class, we see that trade unions are closely affiliated often with the Labour Party, which is why we have 12 affiliated trade unions with it. Now, let's talk about the process of appointing a party leader. It's a little bit more complicated than that of the Conservative Party, and also is the creation of policy is also slightly different to that of the Conservative Party as well. So when it comes to appointing a leader, we have a number of different stages. It should be noted that the current leader of the Labour Party is the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition, who is Sir Keir Starmer. He took over in the start of 2020 after the leadership elections, after the previous leader, Jeremy Corbyn, stepped down following an election defeat in 2019. And we see that the process, it goes on through a different number of stages. So it's a stage-based process. So there are a number of different stages that each candidate will have to get through before they have a chance of winning. So in the first stage, this is where the Parliamentary Labour Party make the most significant of the impacts. This is the way the Parliamentary Labour Party really does have its most influential aspects of it. And these are the where they make nominations for and on potential candidates. So they will vote on potential candidates who are running as leaders of the Labour Party. And in order to make it past this first stage, a candidate needs to have at least 10% of the vote of the Parliamentary Labour Party. So whereas when it's talking about the Conservative Party, the members of Parliament were incredibly influential in effectively whittling down the candidates all the way down to the last two. When it comes to the Labour Party, the Parliamentary Labour Party don't whittle it down to the last two, but you do need to have at least 10% of the PLP vote in order to get through to the next stage. We also should note that as of September 2018, candidates also need to have support of either 5% of the local parties, or local affiliations with the Labour Party, or 5% of the aforementioned trade union affiliates as well. So we also have to have quite broad support from them as well. So again, if we were to compare and contrast the process for the Conservative Party compared to the process for the Labour Party, we can see that a much broader representative of the party is required for the Labour Party. You need 10% of the MPs. You also need at least 5% of either the local parties or the trade union affiliates. And that's just to get to the next stage. And then once we get past this next stage and we have these particular votes, then voting is open to the rest of the registered members of the Labour Party. And they use the AV alternative vote election system or voting system that you should know about already from your study of elections. Now, one of the more controversial aspects of this particular voting system was when we look at the 2015 process of electing a new leader. In 2015, the leader that was elected, who replaced Ed Miliband, was Jeremy Corbyn. Now, as a result of Jeremy Corbyn running as leader of the Labour Party, the number of members of the Labour Party shot up significantly. And one of the reasons for this was because a number of people from other parties who wanted to see Jeremy Corbyn win because they believed that he would be a very unpopular candidate, joined the Labour Party to vote for him, to get him in office, and to therefore be able to have a easier time against somebody like Jeremy Corbyn compared to other candidates. Now, this obviously changed, and they changed around with the process of being able to just simply register to come in and vote for the least appealing party member, and then dip out again. So we see that this process has slightly changed, and we also see, of course, under the remit of Jeremy Corbyn, we see in 2018 a reform made to the support required by trade union affiliates and local parties. Now, when it comes to creating policy, as I've already mentioned earlier on, again, this is a much more democratic process than that of the Conservative Party. With the Conservative Party, we have a much more top-down approach, whereby we have the leader and members within the leadership of the Conservative Party effectively deciding what policy should go where in the manifesto. The Labour Party is a little bit more democratic. People get to vote on it in a bit more of a broader sense. So the first thing that happens is representatives from all across the party, we're talking from the higher-ups all the way down to the lower-down parts of the party, come together and form the National Policy Forum. Now, the National Policy Forum agrees on the direction of policy and arranges policy commissions to draft and establish Labour Party policy for the manifesto. And in this process, the Labour leader, while not having the same kind of power in creating policy as the Conservative leader, the Labour leader still has the ability to utilise personal authority and popularity to win support for certain measures. Don't forget, the Labour leader who may have just been elected, has broad support from obviously the PLP, the NEC, and also from trade union affiliates as well. So we know that the Labour leader can utilise or personal authority and popularity to win support and to have quite a heavy influence on the policy direction. But at least from a formal process, it is one that is done by the National Policy Forum. And then once we have a draft idea of what policies are going to be included in the manifesto, policies are then voted on at the National Party Conference.